The kingdom of Valathir was a place of grand castles and lush forests, where the sun only rarely peeked through the clouds, casting a pale light over the land. It was ruled by King Arden Blackthorn, an alpha king whose strength and resolve were unmatched. His people admired him, and his bloodline had long held the throne. But despite his power, there was a sadness that hung over him, one he couldn't escape. Arden had always been a man of duty. He had been raised to rule with fairness and strength, never letting emotions interfere with his responsibilities. However, there was one duty he couldn't avoid: his marriage. The prophecy of the kingdom spoke of an arranged match, a marriage between him and Lady Alara, a noblewoman from a powerful family. She was beautiful, graceful, and admired by all. But as Arden looked at her, he felt nothing. No love, no warmth, only the cold weight of obligation. He had never believed in fate, but the prophecy was clear. He was meant to marry Lady Alara. The kingdom needed a strong queen, and Arden knew that Alara was the one who would ensure the future of the Blackthorn bloodline. Still, as the wedding day approached, there was a strange emptiness in his heart that he could not ignore. Something told him that this wasn't the path meant for him. The grand hall was decorated with golden banners, and the sounds of a soft, graceful melody filled the air. Guests from all over the kingdom had gathered to witness the union of their king and queen. Lady Alara stood at the altar, her beauty unmatched in her shimmering gown. She looked every part the perfect bride, beautiful, poised, and perfect for the role. But as Arden stood at the front of the hall, something inside him stirred. The prophecy, the crown, the duty, it all seemed like a distant memory now. The weight of the moment felt too much. He was about to marry a woman who was meant to be his, yet in his heart he knew she was not the one he was destined for. His mind raced. He had felt a strange pull, something he couldn't explain when he looked at Alara. Yet that pull was nothing compared to the emptiness he felt now. The prophecy had guided his life for so long, but now it felt wrong. His heart beat faster, and the words that had always seemed to come so easily to him now felt like a burden. Suddenly, without thinking, Arden stepped forward and addressed the crowd. I cannot marry her." A shocked silence filled the hall. The guests stared at him, unsure if they had heard him correctly. The eyes of the nobles widened, and Lady Alara's expression shifted from confusion to heartbreak. "But, Your Majesty," Alara whispered, her voice trembling, "we are bound by the prophecy." "By duty." Arden's eyes locked with hers. He could see the pain in her eyes, but it was not enough to make him change his mind. "I am bound by a different fate," he said softly. The room was filled with murmurs. Arden had just defied the prophecy, defied his people, and his heart told him he was making the right choice. Yet even as he rejected the marriage, a deeper question lingered. If Alara was not the one meant for him, who was? He turned and walked out of the hall, leaving behind the life he had known and the path everyone expected him to take. As he left, he knew the decision would not only change his life, but the future of Valathir. Later that evening, as Arden wandered the royal gardens, his mind was consumed with doubt. He had always known what was expected of him, but now, for the first time, he felt truly lost. The moonlight bathed the gardens in a soft glow, and the air was cool and quiet. As he walked among the trees, he saw a figure ahead, a woman standing alone in the shadows. Her presence was strange, almost ethereal, as if she didn't belong in the world of the nobility and kings. She wore a simple dress, and her dark hair hung loose around her shoulders. She looked out of place in the grandeur of the palace. Arden stopped in his tracks, his heart suddenly pounding again. Something about this woman felt different. There was a pull, an undeniable connection he couldn't explain. He had never seen her before, and yet in her eyes there was something familiar, something comforting. The woman turned toward him, startled at his sudden appearance. "My king," she said quietly, bowing her head. Arden took a step closer, trying to make sense of the strange feeling she stirred inside him. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice a mix of curiosity and confusion. I am Astria Voss," she replied, her voice soft but clear. A servant here at the palace. Arden raised an eyebrow. A servant? She didn't look like any servant he had ever seen. There was something about her presence, her eyes that made her stand out. He found himself captivated by her in a way he had never been before. "Why are you out here alone?" he asked, his gaze never leaving her face. "I was just walking," Astria answered, glancing around as if unsure of herself. "The gardens are peaceful at night." Arden nodded slowly. "You're not from Valathir, are you?" She shook her head. "No, Your Majesty. I was born in the neighboring village." Astria looked down at the ground, almost as if embarrassed by the attention he was giving her. But Arden could not look away. There was something in her gaze, something in the way she stood so calmly before him, that made his heart ache. He had never known a woman like her. Not like this. I shouldn't be here," Astria muttered, stepping back. "I am only a servant, and you are the king." Arden reached out, gently grasping her arm. His touch was firm but not harsh, and she looked up at him in surprise. "What is it about you?" he asked quietly. "I feel like I know you." Astria's heart raced, and she quickly looked away. "I don't know, Your Majesty. Perhaps it is just the stars aligning." The word seemed odd to her, but she couldn't explain the feeling either. Stars aligning. It was as if there was something fated between them, something neither of them could control. Arden took a deep breath, stepping back. "I should not be here, speaking to you like this," he said softly, the weight of his position settling back onto his shoulders. "But I can't explain it. Something about you feels important, like you are tied to my destiny." Astria looked up at him, her heart now in her throat. Could it be true? Was this the fate she had always wondered about? The fate she had never believed in? Before she could respond, a loud crash echoed through the palace, pulling them both out of their trance. They turned to see a group of guards rushing through the garden. Arden's face tightened as the sound of chaos echoed through the corridors. "Your Majesty!" one of the guards called, panting. "There's trouble in the kingdom. Enemies are moving against us." Arden's expression darkened. The peace of Valathir was fragile, and he knew that defying the prophecy would not come without consequences. As the guards rushed past, Arden turned back to Astria. His heart was torn. He knew that his life and the future of the kingdom would never be the same again. And as he watched Astria slip away into the shadows of the night, he realized that his true fate, whatever it was now tied to hers. But what did it mean? What had he just begun? Cliffhanger. Before he could make sense of it, the sound of battle grew louder. Something was coming for him. And Astria was caught in the storm. The night grew darker as the distant sounds of battle echoed throughout the palace. Arden Blackthorn, Alpha King of Valathir, stood frozen in the garden, his heart still racing from the strange encounter with Astria Voss. For a moment, he had felt something stir within him, something deep and unsettling. And yet he could not explain it. She was only a servant, and yet the pull between them felt undeniable. Was it fate? Was it destiny? Or was it simply a fleeting moment that would soon fade into nothingness? But before he could answer his own questions, the battle cries grew louder. The palace guards rushed past him, their faces filled with urgency and fear. His kingdom was under attack, and Arden could not afford to waste another moment. His responsibility as a king, as the protector of Valathir, demanded that he act. "Your Majesty," one of the guards shouted as they passed him. "Enemies are at the gates. We need your leadership now." Arden nodded grimly, his mind already shifting back into the role he had always known, king, alpha, protector of his people. He turned and hurried back toward the palace, where chaos had already erupted. Inside the palace, nobles and servants alike were running through the halls, panic clear in their eyes. Arden's advisors gathered around him, offering reports of the enemy forces gathering outside the walls of Valathir. Their numbers were large, and they had come prepared for war. The peaceful kingdom Arden had known for most of his life was now on the brink of collapse. But in the midst of it all, his mind kept returning to Astria. He had to admit, even though he had just met her, there was something about her that made her stand out. She wasn't like the other women he had encountered in his life, all of whom were focused on politics, power, and titles. Astria seemed different, humble, grounded, and yet undeniably strong. There was something about her that felt important. His heart could not ignore the pull he felt toward her. "Your Majesty," one of his advisors interrupted his thoughts, snapping him back to the present. "We need to make a decision. The enemy forces are growing closer. What are your orders?" Arden took a deep breath, his hands clenching into fists. He had always been a man of action, but now his heart was divided. He had a kingdom to protect, but something was stirring deep inside him, a feeling he had never experienced before. Astria was in the palace somewhere, and he couldn't help but worry about her safety. But he also knew that he could not let his personal feelings cloud his judgment. "The kingdom came first. I'll lead the charge," Arden said, his voice steady. "Prepare the men. We cannot allow them to breach the walls." As the advisors scattered to carry out his orders, Arden's mind raced. He knew this battle was only the beginning. The kingdom was under threat, but the prophecy he had long tried to ignore, was now becoming more real than ever. The future of Valathir rested on his shoulders, and the decisions he made today would change everything. Meanwhile, Astria walked through the palace halls, her heart heavy with confusion. She had never imagined that a single conversation with the king would affect her so deeply. What had happened between them in the garden? She couldn't explain it. She didn't understand it. And yet she couldn't ignore the truth. There was a connection between them, one that felt fated, destined even. But she was a servant. He was the king. How could they ever be anything more than strangers, bound by their roles in the world? The sudden sound of footsteps pulled Astria from her thoughts. She turned quickly and saw one of the guards approaching her, a look of urgency in his eyes. "Lady Astria," he said breathlessly, "the kingdom is under attack. You need to leave the palace immediately. The enemy is too close." Astria's heart skipped a beat. Under attack? Panic surged within her as she glanced around. She couldn't just leave. There was so much happening in the palace, so much chaos, and she didn't know what was happening to Arden. She had seen him earlier, standing alone in the garden, his eyes filled with a strange intensity. She knew he was a man of duty, but she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something deeper between them. But now, the danger was real, and her duty as a servant called her to protect the people. "I understand," she said quickly. "I will go, but I need to find the king. Please, tell him I must speak with him before I leave." The guard hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. "I will find him for you. Hurry!" Astria made her way toward the royal chambers, her heart pounding in her chest. She needed to find Arden. She had to know if he was okay. The prophecy, the strange connection they had shared, everything was suddenly more complicated than she could have imagined. When she reached the door to the king's chambers, she found it open. Arden was standing near the window, looking out over the battlefield that stretched beyond the palace walls. The moonlight bathed him in a soft glow, and for a moment, Astria could only stand there, watching him in silence. He was the Alpha King, the protector of Valathir, yet in that moment, he seemed like a man carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. Arden turned at the sound of her footsteps, and his eyes met hers. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke, as if the very air around them was charged with the weight of their unspoken emotions. "Astria," Arden said quietly, his voice softer than usual. "What are you doing here?" "I heard the news," she replied, her voice steady but filled with concern. "The kingdom is under attack. I needed to see you. Are you all right?" Arden took a deep breath, his expression hardening. "I will be fine. But the kingdom. Valathir is at war. I have to protect it, no matter the cost." Astria nodded, her heart aching for him. "I know you will, but you cannot carry this burden alone." His eyes softened as he looked at her, and for a moment she thought she saw a flicker of something in his gaze, something that spoke of trust, of shared understanding. But then the moment passed and Arden turned back toward the window. "I have no choice," he said, his voice firm once more. "I am the king. It is my duty to protect my people." Astria stepped forward, her heart swelling with an emotion she couldn't quite name. "You are not alone, Arden. You don't have to bear this burden by yourself." There was a long silence, and for a brief moment it seemed like the world had stopped. Then Arden turned back toward her, his face softening. "You are right," he said quietly. "I don't know what I would do without you, Astria." The words hung between them heavier than any sword or shield. The truth of it, the bond they shared, was undeniable. And in that moment, Astria realized that her heart had been forever changed. Whether fate had brought them together, or whether it was simply the choice of two souls bound by something beyond their control, she didn't know. But she knew one thing for sure. She couldn't walk away from him now. Before she could speak, the sound of a horn blasted through the air, signaling that the battle was upon them. Arden turned sharply, his expression hardened once again. "I must go," Astria nodded, understanding the weight of his duty. "I will pray for your safety, Your Majesty." Arden gave her a brief but intense look before turning and walking toward the door. Just before he left, he stopped, looking back at her. "Stay safe, Astria. Promise me." "I promise," she said softly. And as he disappeared into the hallway, Astria's heart weighed heavy with both hope and fear. The storm had begun, and neither of them knew what the future would hold. But one thing was certain: their fates were now intertwined, and nothing could separate them. Not even the world around them. Cliffhanger. As the sounds of battle reached their peak, Astria stood at the window, watching the chaos unfold below. And then, a figure appeared in the distance, a shadow moving through the smoke and dust. It was a rider, coming toward the palace at full speed. Astria's heart raced. Who was this mysterious figure, and what did they bring with them? The answer would change everything.